How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you for being here. I am very excited about this conversation. Let's get started with you telling us a little bit more about who you are and what do you work on.
My name is Rebecca Alvarez Bloomi. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an entrepreneur, mom, lots of hats, but ultimately my passion in life has been sex education. So I started a sexual wellness company about 5 years ago called Bloomi, and we focus on clean intimacy essentials with really great education.
Amazing. Connected are those two pieces between some of the products that you sell and the education piece around sexual wellness.
What I have found is that they're connected a lot more than I think product companies give them credit. So people, of course, they know they want, for example, like a good toy or a good lube, but a lot of a lot of what I see is when you have education, it goes so much farther in terms of your excitement, your knowledge, how you process like information about pleasure. It's so helpful. So I feel like you can't have one without the other. The other thing too is I think that a lot of CPG companies, they do have like a blog or they have a couple of articles, but they're not centered around like expertise. And I really feel like that's a miss. I think if you can get people who are like lovers of the field, experts in the field, it's so helpful just for education, but it's also super helpful for product.
To inform what you're making. I'm curious, how have you seen the landscape around sexual wellness shift over the last 5 years?
Oh my gosh, it's been changing every decade. There's so many new trends that just started, I would say, this year, not even January, but like in the last 12 months. But I would say overall, there's a little bit less stigma. There are more sexual wellness companies, emerging sexual wellness companies. Sorry, of course, people are calling me. I think the landscape has changed a lot. I would say in the last 5 years, there's less stigma, there's more product offerings that clean essentials are coming out more often. But also, I feel like there's trends that are impacting the way people even approach intimacy in relationships. Like, for example, people are having less sex. And I don't think that that's going to change anytime soon. I think that there's a lot of sexual anxiety. I think that there's a lot of disconnect in relationships. We're actually in what I call like an intimacy crisis. But besides that, you still see that people are shopping for product, they're being more intentional with their dollars, things like that. So overall, like things get better on a macro level, but there's so many things happening that are impacting people's libidos.
That is very concerning and also really, really fascinating. Do we know why people are having less sex?
Lots of reasons. So it has a lot to do with generations. So younger generations are having less sex. A lot of it comes from sexual anxiety, not wanting to have that fear of pregnancy. A lot of times people are just opting out and they want other forms of intimacy and they feel that sex can be more complicated, especially when they see like the older generations have so much with divorce rates, unhappiness in the relationship. So I think generation is one. But the other one, I feel like with all of the high stress that we're dealing with, when you have high levels of stress, it's going to lower your libido. When you
Mhm.
have poor sleep, it's going to lower your libido. So I just think as a society, we are overworked and tired.
And that leads to, yeah, you get home, you're tired, you have a headache, you have a busy day tomorrow,
Yes.
and you just get caught in that. Well, I am glad that you're around offering products and education because, I think that there's quite a lot of research, right, around how like an active sexual life also leads to better mental and physical health.
They're connected 100%. And I think that the intimacy side is always this underlying precursor to other things in your life. So if sex is great, your relationship tends to be better. If sex is great, you tend to do better at work and perform better at work. It's almost like it's the like invisible thing that people don't realize is at the center of so much of their happiness. Yet a lot of people don't have to necessarily be having sex with another person in order to have those benefits. You can still see those benefits if you're masturbating, if you're engaging really intentionally physically with your partner. So there's just that connectedness and downtime is so, so good for us.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's more about the pleasure than the physical act of sex, but just like making sure that you are, having as much as you're working and being stressed, you're also building pleasure into your life.
Yeah. And I tell people all the time, even like 5 minutes of something pleasurable for you is going to go a long way. Like our brains react really nicely to pleasure, right? But at the same time, one of the most like ultimate times that we get pleasure is when we orgasm, which is why that cocktail of feel good hormones is something people crave. But you can get it in other ways. People are surprised to hear you can have a very similar effect by dancing, listening to a song that you like, getting a massage. There's like a lot of things that people don't associate with like extreme pleasure that are very pleasurable.
Good to know. But also, I like the key message that people should be having more sex, just in general, because that'll make happier. You know, when it's like when you're stressed and your friends are like, "Are you eating well? Are you exercising? Are you sleeping?" And you're like, "No, I'm not doing all of these things." We should add like, "Are you having enough
Are you
sex?"
having
to
good
that.
sex?
Yeah, not only enough, but good sex. I think that's a whole other category. One of the things that we're, both Bloomy and Miners are thinking about as February is coming is self-love and what that means. And I'm really curious what that means to you.
Hmm. I think it's become a trendy term. I think that a lot
Hmm.
of consumerism is centered around it, but at a like at a kind of baseline level to me, it's the core of like feeling okay. It's how you take care of yourself and making sure that whatever it means to you, you're engaging in those things. So for example, I need exercise. That is a form of self-care for me. And even though I may not feel in the mood to go work out at 5 or 6 in the morning, I still realized that that is my time to really, it's uninterrupted. I'm feeling good. I get to feel great after. It's a good start to the day. So I think self care can be something like that, but it can also be the having a good masturbation session, or it could be the small moments and the big moments, planning the 5 minutes that you need in between stressful meetings. But it can also be planning the vacation with your friends that you've really been wanting to go on. So that spectrum is important to have. And if you have a ton of little things, but no big things, it might feel like you don't have that excitement of something really fun for you to look forward to. So I love to recommend both. Have the little things and have something really big and exciting coming up for you, not around the corner, but like in the near future.
And you mentioned some of those, but what are some of those practices that have really transformed your well-being?
Sleep is so underrated. If I do a really nice like sleep hygiene routine where I'm unwinding, I'm off of electronics, I have a good magnesium tea, a hot shower, even if I already showered, like things like that just to wind down and have great sleep. Like I can do almost anything when I have great sleep. I feel like the other thing is my time with my partner, it's non-negotiable. Like I need to have quality time with him, but we've also learned that there's two kinds of ways we hang out. And so for me, having hey, I need to vent, I need to get this out. Let me talk about this business idea. Like that's work mode with my partner. But then we need just unwind, no work talk, just time together. So that's important for my mental health and like everyday wellness. And then I would say too, like I have an intimacy company. So I really enjoy intimacy. I have all my products on my nightstand and in my shower. They're important to me. 5 minutes, 1 hour, I don't care. Like I use them as needed.
Yeah, no, I think that is so important where you're saying around like differentiating. You talked about three different things. One, time with your partner where it's like that like emotional partnership support of like I'm going through a difficult moment. Can we talk about it and have that person be there for you? A moment of connection, right? Of just like being there with each other and having quality time, but then also doing that with yourself, whether that is, in the shower or in your bed or, whatever that means to you, but having that piece of practices that are you with you and that you can always, pull into.
Totally. Yes.
I, I totally agree with you with the word self-love. I struggle with it. I find it a little cringe, but that's why I want to ask what it really means to people because I think it can mean something like it's an easy term that you can throw around, but then when you redefine it, and it really a lot of the times for me, it's like how do I take care of me and how do I find the things that help me feel better? A lot of the times it's like you don't even know what your tools are. So spending time figuring out what does it mean to me, I think is the most important part.
Oh my gosh, that's so well said. I think that's a main struggle that I used to have when I was work, work, work 100% of the time. It's like, what do I even like to do? And my husband asked me the other day, do you still like salsa dancing? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, when was the last time you went? I was like, shoot. So it's just those small like habits that we do when we're like not, I think, overly consumed with one thing going on in our life. Like those are fun and just bringing some of that back.
also want to go salsa dancing more, so we should go together because
We
it's
should
one of
go.
those things that you do it and then you're like, I feel so much better. Why don't I do this more?
Yeah.
And then I don't do it more. So like we can be accountable to that.
And San Francisco has good spots.
Yeah, it does. One other thing I've been curious about is I follow a couple intimacy companies, and a little bit about the conversation is how difficult it is to have this conversation online and being able to like advertise and grow your business with some of those limitations. Can you share what that experience has been?
Yes, I think, well, what you're referring to is Meta, for example, doesn't allow advertisements of anything that has to do with female pleasure. However, you can advertise Viagra, you can advertise condoms, which is an issue at the top,
Hypocritical.
I say. Yes, hypocritical and an issue at the top. But, you know, everybody's really resourceful, and I've seen multiple companies find the workarounds. So if you really, really want to have ads on Meta and you need that in order to grow in the early years, then there's a way around it. And we can talk about it. But those loopholes, I think, are just like another thing that we have to figure out. For us, what we have found is yes, organic growth is very important, but of course, we also need to have paid. So we go to other things. You can still, use Google. You can still use other social media platforms. You can do old school mailers. Like there's things you could do that are still paid, but it's not digital on Meta, for example.
Okay. I'm glad that there's workarounds because I see that and it just frustrates me when it's like, oh, that's
I know.
our bodies are different. And I think it goes into so many other areas around female health of like just not being able to have these conversations around our bodies. There's a lot of taboo, even between us as women, to talk about some of the things that might be happening and that are uncomfortable. So thank you for the work that you do breaking down those barriers.
Thank you. Yes.
I wanted to chat a little bit about balance. I think I shared this with you last time that it's a lot of what this new direction for mine is. It also reflects where I am, where it's like, I really want to enjoy my work and I want to enjoy my life. And I'm curious about what that has looked like for you in particular, if there's been a moment or a period where you've realized that the approach that you were having to work wasn't sustainable and what that looked like.
I feel like this is something that I'm always working on. This is our fifth year as a company and our third year as a brand. Maybe it's almost 6 and 4, to be honest. We're getting closer. I feel like every year is different. And I've realized that if you have a business, you have a startup, like every 6 months, I feel like my role is changing. And
Mhm.
whether that means like we grew really quickly and now we know we need new things, or we're not growing quickly and now we need new things. And I think that stress and being able to adapt to it is something that I thrive in. Like I actually have very high resiliency. I can be under a lot of stress and perform well. I joke that I should have been like an ER doctor, but I also realize that there's kind of the invisible toll that it can take on you too, where it's like, oh, I can get through that. We all build that figure it out muscle, right? As entrepreneurs or as moms or as women or as whatever. But I think that for me, the balance is not really balanced the way that you would hope. A lot of people talk about it, but there is no such thing as balance. I believe that something is going to not be as great. So if I'm spending 15 hours a day working on a startup, let's say Monday through Thursday, I'm not going to have as much time with my kids. And that's just my reality. But I'm super intentional when I am with them. So if we're having dinner or if we're going away for the weekend, like that's how I feel like I have balance when I'm intentional. But I'm still working on it. It's a lot. Like companies require so much of you. It's literally like you're pouring your own soul and energy into it. So yeah, let me know if you figure out any special tricks.
No, that's why I'm having this conversation because I'm like, please, everybody, tell me their secrets. And there's so much that we're learning. But I think a big part of it is also accepting that it is what it takes a lot of the times to build a company. It is that period, but also being intentional about maybe it's not as much time as you would want, but then make it really good quality time so that you're balancing that out. I'm curious as well as to your point, right? Like sometimes we spend like so much time working, and a lot of us coordinate productivity with worth, but that's not necessarily related. I'm wondering, how do you measure progress for yourself and for the company?
Progress for the company, I think, is a little easier because you have metrics and KPIs. And I think setting those, knowing them, communicating those makes it goes a long way. I think in the early years, I was trying to make sure that we just had a bigger number, and that strategy does not work. You need to understand where your traffic is coming from and like the very detailed nuances to your goals. I think I've always had a plan B, and I think that's been helpful with setting goals. Okay, that didn't work, or we didn't get that. Now let's move into this mode. That's been a lifesaver sometimes. I think personally, I feel like I treat my life a little bit like a business sometimes. So I do have personal goals, but I always feel like they're intertwined. So if the company can do this, then that means I can do this. Like it's almost like they're intertwined for me, which is a good and a bad thing, I would say. It's good because then that means that things are snowballing in the same direction, but that can be in the good direction or in the not good direction. So I think that's the bad side of it.
Yeah, yeah, and they are intertwined is the reality, right? And it's like we try to separate them as much as we can, but especially as you were saying, when you're pouring so much of you into the company and it's such an expression of your beliefs, it's natural that they become intertwined. Thinking a little bit about body, and we were talking about that earlier, but digging in a little deeper, as you've evolved in your career, in your life, I'm wondering if you've also noticed changes in your body that either support or challenge some of your ambitions and your goals.
You mean as I'm aging?
Yeah. As you're aging, as you're changing.
Okay, so I was kind of joking a little bit with my husband about this, but I definitely feel wiser. Okay. I feel like I have reps. Okay. And I think that having two girls now, this is my first startup that I started, but this is not my first startup that I am at. So I think just having experience like that makes it feel calmer, just a little
Hmm.
bit like, okay, I got this, or this is familiar. It's almost like we're building that intuition even better. But at the same time, I feel like there's so many things that I know are happening, but at the same time, it's different when you like I know they're going to happen, but it's different when you start to feel them happen. So, for example, I'm 39 and you can start having like premenopause symptoms in your 30s. And a lot of people are really
Hmm.
shocked about that. But I'm like, wait, is that a premenopause symptom? So I'm kind of like thinking about that. Really, you don't go through menopause usually until you're in your 50s, but like you can have symptoms that start. So for me, it's really important to think ahead like that. Okay, so what is that gonna feel like for me personally? Is that gonna influence like the solutions I want to bring to my community? So I think a lot in terms of like intimacy. The future of intimacy is important to me. I also feel like I'm good at setting boundaries and I'm good at like managing my time. And I think that just comes with experience. But the one thing that I cannot get like a great balance on is how to run a startup and still have all the time I want for myself to do other things. So it's almost like I feel like I'm in a phase and I'm in the phase of the startup. And so for the next X amount of years, I'm willing to give it all this energy. But like this is not sustainable either. Like we need to
Hmm.
have, I think, phases or breaks.
Yeah, yeah. And it's natural to have phases. Like I as women, we have phases during the month where we have cycles, right? We have phases as like, before we get our periods, we get our periods, then we into perimenopause, then we go through menopause, like there's also those phases that I think we don't talk about enough, but your body's shifting, right? Your needs are shifting, how things feel are shifting. I'm curious if you've noticed or if you have any insights in how the relationship with intimacy change as women age or start to get closer to those periods of perimenopause and menopause.
Oh, there's like so many things. I could talk to you for like a whole weekend about it. But what I like to say is to keep in mind that your sexuality and your intimacy and your pleasure, everything is very fluid. So as you get older and with every new partner, because every relationship is so different, your pleasure, your desire, like what you crave from that interaction is going to change. Even if you've been married for 10 years, it's going to change from year one to year 10. So it's good to just give yourself permission to have that be okay and that fluidity to just allow yourself to move through it and say, you know what, I used to really like that, but I think I'm not really into it anymore. Or, you know what, I've been thinking about? Like, I think I want to explore these areas now. I want to
Mhm.
explore kink or whatever it is. So I think that's important, but also just as you're getting closer to, I'll say like the bigger cycle changes, just learning as much as you can because there's a lot of misinformation, trying to use credible sources. I've heard menopause is the new black. There's so much funding going into companies like Bloomi that are building solutions like specifically tailored to different audiences, like women going through menopause. But I think a lot of it is just the unknown. When we've polled our community, it's actually not, how do I say this? It's not high levels of stress in women going through menopause. It's actually much higher levels of stress of people anticipating menopause. And I think that like fear of the unknown or like what is it going to be like for me, and I equate it to having a baby. Like everyone's experience is going to be so different. I wish it was only 9 months, but it's going to be a little bit longer of a transition. But I just think it's you're going to have to just kind of go with the flow, right? You're going to have to see how it feels for you and seek out solutions when you need them. Talking to girlfriends is great, but like having a good clinician, and I don't always recommend like only have like an OBGYN. Yes, have an OBGYN, but also have whoever you need, your therapist, your spiritual counselor, your doula, like whoever that is to you to round out information.
Yeah, and to have that holistic approach to our health, right? Because a lot of it, to your point, is not just like your body is shifting, but it's the stress of the fact that your body is shifting or the stress of the expectation that your body is going to shift. And how do you manage that? And how do you deal with it today? We've been doing more research into menopause. And honestly, sometimes I get stressed. I'm like, oh my God, all of these things are going to happen to me. When are they going to happen? Like, I'm 32, and some women start perimenopause when they're 36. That's around the corner in many ways, right? So,
It's the fear and the anxiety. But what I can tell you is like, I think what society is doing is it's throwing all possible symptoms out at us. And some women have no symptoms. Some women have
my mom
no
said she was like, I had like it was like hot some days and like but it was like it didn't like derail my life significantly. Well, for my aunt was like a very intense experience. So it can be unique.
yeah, it's going to be very unique to you.
Talking of what you're saying around like, there's more information about menopause now, or it's a bigger conversation as well as what we were saying before about sexual wellness. There is parts that we're talking about and there's others that continue to be taboo. There's not a lot of research that's going into it. I wonder from you as like a female founder in the intimacy space, what would you like this conversation to look like around women's health, both, physical, mental, and sexual?
I think that I would really like to see people having open conversations in group settings, whether that be like good friends and people you don't know, but just having like mini pods of communities because I think that's where a lot of the support and the grounding and the sharing of knowledge is happening. For Bloomy, I started this, I'm going to call it a series, but it's a series called Intimate Talk, where we have events, whether it's a dinner or a happy hour. We call it a sip and learn sometimes, but basically event spaces where I can do a little bit of like a master class, have a small group. Sometimes it's 20, sometimes it's 50. And we dive into one topic and then we do activities together. And people can come with their partners. So sometimes it's a date night. And what I found is the smaller the group, the more intimate and close everybody becomes. So it's great when people can view an online class or be part of an online community, but there's nothing like being in person talking about these very vulnerable topics. That's hard to scale, but it is so good for your soul.
Yeah, yeah. And as sometimes I get very stressed about the state of the world, both politically and just like the environment and where we're heading with climate change. I do believe that the answer lies in community. And sometimes it's that tight-knit community where you can have this like very deep conversations, look for that support. So maybe it's not meant to scale, right? Some things
Yeah.
can work at a small setting because that is what makes them so special and so supportive. Changing gears a little bit, I'm curious a little bit more about you. So like outside of the female founder startup badass that you are, what brings you joy outside of work? Who are you when you're not, running?
When I'm not running Bloomy, I'm mom a lot of the time. So let me do that and let me do not mom, but you're never not mom. I think I
Yeah.
really enjoy spending time with my kids. I think that they're both such amazing girls that have such different personalities, but I feel like a lot of joy, especially with my little one when she's going through all these baby phases that she's growing out of. She's 5 now and she's learning in the way that she like processes. It's so innocent and sweet. Like I just enjoy that, whether that's a kids movie or she wants to ride her bike or things that are just very sweet. And she'll
Mhm.
say things like, "Look, mommy, the flower looks really pretty. Let's smell it." And it's like literally stopping with her to smell flowers is so sweet and endearing to me. And then my oldest, I feel like I have a teenager too. So she is just turning into like such a beautiful, smart person. And I enjoy speaking with her about all these complicated things, talking about her future, traveling abroad. Like, I enjoy that. If you put that to the side, I love things that are very artsy. I love drawing. I love film. I love dancing. I think that creative side is something that's really fun for me to do when I can. It's a really fun outlet. It's just, there's usually like time involved in like
Mhm.
planning it, doing it, going to it.
Yeah. But I love having those two sides, right? Because it's like there's you, Rebecca, Rebecca mom, Rebecca entrepreneur, and they all need different things at different moments. If I talk about you talk about your kids, which I'm assuming reminds you of you when you were younger, and I wonder if you would go back and give yourself any key piece of advice, what would it be?
For what age?
Let's say 10 years ago.
For 10 years ago? Ooh, I would have said, yes, start the company, but consider bootstrapping it.
Mm, yeah.
Yep. And I think I did for maybe 6 months and then I raised capital, but I think I could have done it a little longer.
And you would have kept some of the control and less of the stress that comes with.
I think so. And I feel like venture is something that we could talk about all day, but I feel like venture is great. I just think that it changes the goals and it changes the way that you do things and the expectations literally overnight. So I think that it's nice to get these reps out as a founder. It's like a whole new world to, I don't know, to start a new venture that you're so excited about, but then it shifts into making sure that you're balancing investor needs. And I think investors are super smart and incredible and we love our investors, but it's also really, really hard and there's not enough funding going to Latinas, which we can also talk about all day. And I think that scarcity is something that I wish I could avoid, but it's just part of the game and part of like being in this space. So I think I would probably just say like see what happens if you continue bootstrapping by yourself.
Yeah. And, venture is, to your point, amazing. And it's giving, both of us a lot of opportunities to test and learn and move faster. But at the same time, it changes the goalpost in terms of like what you need to achieve when. And to your point, I actually don't like looking at the stats because if I look at the statistics of what like Latina female founders should be raising, I do not know how, both of us are here. It's like such a small percentage. Just want to believe that, that's
No.
changing.
I know. It's also so it's not that I'm against venture because I think I'm actually going to end up being an investor one day, but I just feel that if I could like if I could share with people and educate kind of the investor landscape on what these specific challenges are raising as a woman of color, Latina, like whatever layer you want to put in there, if I didn't have to explain it to folks as much, I think it would be easier. Because I think some people do mean well and they want to be able to say, like, I have a diverse portfolio and help me understand why it's so challenging for you. That's taxing. And I think
Yeah.
it's not the raising capital. It's the raising capital and doing it with who we are and making it not as stressful for us. It's always like an extra, I think it's always harder for us. And I think that's what the unfortunate part is. And I wish I could take that layer off.
Yeah. And there's the only thing we can do right now is just like keep going at it and hoping that it will be better for the people that come behind. That's always what
Totally.
I think about. It's like, we'll slam open these doors and then we'll hold them open for everyone who comes behind us so that if any of the suffering and stress that we've been through can help someone avoid some of that, it could be amazing. And I think part of that is like showing investors that like we are a demographic that's like, show me a group of people that's harder working than the Latinos
Oh my
and
gosh.
you'll struggle to find one. You mentioned a little bit of this, but I'm curious what as your relationship with work and with Bloomy shifts, how do you see your relationship with work evolving over the next 5 to 10 years? And maybe it's as you would call it, probably like the next phase.
Yeah, the phase. I'm definitely excited for the future of Bloomy. We have some really exciting things coming up this year that have been in the making for like 2 years. So I think that's really exciting for me. It makes me happy. I feel like a lot of our team's really, really hard work is kind of coming to light. So just excitement, personal excitement for the brand and like understanding like what that's going to do for us. I also feel like um I'm excited about seeing how community comes together during this time because the next 4 years are going to be complicated and challenging for a lot of reasons. And I think that, again, going back to like stress, I know what stress is doing for people's connectedness, and I want to be able to help there because I feel like I can. And it's not about selling you a toy, even though I feel like you should probably own a toy if you don't own a toy. It's about like teaching you about your body, helping you understand sex ed a little bit better as an adult, giving you more permission to have pleasure, to masturbate, understanding like why that's important, and being able to tell that kind of over and over so that people get excited about their own solutions. I'm excited about seeing that come to fruition during a very stressful time. I don't want the stressful time, but if that makes sense, I'm just like, I know this is going to
Yeah.
be needed.
It's going to be so needed, and it is going to be a stressful time because we know, like we already are as Latinos, in a very different position today that we were at the beginning of this year or earlier this year before the administration changed in terms of, our status in this country. But I think to your point, fostering that connection with yourself in the intimacy teaching, or allowing women to explore their own bodies, to figure out like what they like and how they like it so that they can then empower them to communicate them with their partners, right? Like that's something that I wonder if generations above us were even considering. Well, at my age, it feels like all of my friends have a toy. And if not, I am the one who's like at girls' night being like, here's the one I bought. Everybody should have this one. But like opening those conversations and leading to connection, I feel like it's a great antidote for the stress that we're going to come through over the next few years.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really important one. So I'm glad that we are available. Now we want to make sure we stay available, and that's a whole other conversation with all the retail news going on, but there's just a lot of challenges in general, I'll say. And I feel like if we can focus on staying grounded and leaning into the things that we're curious about, whether that be a hobby, whether that be an intimacy thing, whatever it is, I think that's what's going to help us like come back to center.
Yeah, love it. Okay, we'll wrap up. I'll just ask you a bunch of rapid fire questions and you tell
Okay.
me what comes to your mind. Do you have a favorite book that maybe changed your perspective on something?
Yes, but it's probably not what you're expecting. It's called The Body Keeps Score. And
I've heard
that,
of it.
yeah, it's a trauma book. And the reason that I read it is because it was really helpful for me to understand folks that had been through trauma, how they could enjoy intimacy again.
Amazing. One daily habit you swear by.
Sleep hygiene, having a sleep routine, having a routine to go to sleep.
Sleep routine. Love that. What's your reset button when you feel overwhelmed?
Nature. Just go outside, get some air, deep breaths around a ton of trees. We have a lot of trees in our backyard, but if I walk out like 10 minutes, it's like super, super helpful for me.
I love it. Best investment you've made in yourself.
Ooh. Best investment I've made in myself. Why am I so stumped? There's so many things coming to mind, but the first thing that came to mind is I bought like a really good capsule for myself a couple years ago,
A
and I
capsule?
like a wardrobe capsule.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that I don't have to think about stuff too much because I used to stress about, oh, what am I going to wear? But it's almost like ready to go. I worked with a stylist. Her name is Fabi. She's amazing if anybody's looking for one. She's also Latina. But that was like such a good investment for my like stress levels and clothes.
I need that. I need that. Yeah, yeah. So you're not every day being like, I hate my entire closet, but also I have so much clothes. Like, yeah. Is there like a mantra or a quote that you live by?
Kind of. When I get really tired or when I have like a lot of stress, I just think about what another founder said to me when I asked him like how he got to the $1 billion valuation. He just said, I just never gave up. And he's a founder of color. And he said, literally, you just keep pivoting until you figure it out and you don't give up. So when I get really tired, I think about everyone who's invested in us because Bloomi has almost 1,000 investors from our crowd equity campaign and our angels. And I think about like all of their positive things that they say. I'm like, oh yeah, we haven't come this far to come this far. So it's like a reminder, like, don't give up.
Don't give up. Don't give up. Resiliency. I love it. Rebecca, thank you so much for your time and for everything that you do so that we have better sex, better intimacy, and more connection. It's been so wonderful to chat today.
Thank you. This was fun.